There we go. Okay, well, I guess we can get started. A few of you on this call already know who I am, but my name's Anna Carrasco, and I'm working with Sandy right now at GFSI on the Social Inclusion Lens Toolkit, which will be presenting this afternoon, but the morning, I guess. But a little bit of background on me. I started working with Greater Fredericton Social Innovation when I was in university on a couple different projects and have stayed in close contact with Sandy ever since. So since moving back to Fredericton, we started working on this project together. But before that, I was working for Nova Scotia Liquor Corporation doing accessibility and diversity and inclusion work, which is really great. And I got lots of amazing experience from that we've been able to pull into this project. So that's a bit about me. And then we can jump right into talking about this project that we're all here to learn more about. So I'll share my screen. And can you see that, Sandy?
Yeah.
Okay, so a little bit of background on this project. So social inclusion tool is to help ensure that social inclusion is a core consideration in municipal projects, benefiting diverse communities by actively removing barriers and enhancing equitable access. So in a nutshell, the tool allows people to evaluate their projects, programs, whether it's already started or it's a brand new project, to see kind of where it lands in terms of social inclusion using the metrics that we've provided. So the next one. So kind of understanding the background and why we started this project. We wanted the document to be comprehensive and user-friendly, so making sure that no matter what area in the municipality you're working in, you're able to use this tool, that it's not just specific to kind of one department or unit. So we wanted to make it accessible and easy to use for everyone while also having effective metric tracking. So through some of the documents we looked at when we did the scan, there was some pretty complicated metrics that they used, and we really didn't want to fall into that. We wanted it to be really simple, but still kind of giving a measurable kind of scale of where they're at, so we could compare um, year to year, project to project, where the social inclusion element is and how far we've come, where we need to go. And we used a couple of different resources to kind of develop that metric, which we'll talk about later. And then lastly, just to make it relevant to Fredericton's specific context. So a lot of the different resources we looked at were in places like Edmonton, or a lot of different municipalities in Ontario have a similar tool, but we really wanted to make sure it reflected Fredericton and its unique needs, which you'll see once we look at the tool. And then, so I don't think I'll fully dive into this specific example, but this is the city of Oakville, which I had mentioned before, in Ontario. And we really liked their toolkit as a place to start off, but we felt like it could do a lot more because their questions, it was more of a checklist, and it didn't give you that number of kind of where you're at, which we thought would be really helpful. Again, if you wanted to do this evaluation, let's say in September, and then do it again in March, that number gives you more of a benchmark instead of just checking a box. And then we also looked at this tool from Alberta, whereas their tool was a little bit more, or a little too complicated, we felt. So it was very long, and we didn't think it would be user friendly for people across the municipality, maybe specific to some groups, but maybe a little too time consuming for others. So using kind of both those tools and a bunch of different other resources along the way, we compiled those to create ours. So I think I can end this, and I'll show you where we're at with our toolkit. Sandy, can you see that? So we'll skip right down.
Can you make it a little larger? There you go.
Do that. So, pardon?
That's good.
Okay, perfect. So on the first page here, we just introduced the social inclusion lens, a bit of background, basically going over what I just shared with you, how to use the tool, why we're using it, and its importance, just so people are familiar with the purpose of the tool before they start going in and seeing where they're at. read all of that. And then there's a bit of content on how to put the tool into practice. So just giving some brief steps on how to use the tool, emphasizing to gather community and staff feedback too, and to implement strategies for improvement. So all the different things that'll be covered in this document, but we wanted to keep it pretty brief too, so that people didn't get lost in a lot of preamble. So then this is what the actual framework looks like. So there's 9 different sections that break up different parts of the project that we want to evaluate specific social inclusion elements. So the first being unified vision and leadership. So then there's specific questions that align with that group. Also to do with kind of resources and things like that with the project. So have project leaders established a practice to ensure accountability for inclusion throughout the project implementation. And we also wanted to put this one at the beginning because we felt like that's an very important aspect of the project, and making sure that it's going to succeed, that there's leadership behind that as well. So then this is kind of the fun part that we're excited about. So when you click each evaluation question, whether or not you've completed that one, you can do a little check, and then it'll keep your score at the bottom. And then for some of these questions might not be relevant to each person's specific project, so you just wouldn't answer those ones, which is discussed in the steps at the beginning. It'll say if a question's not relevant, just to not select that answer. And then there's also a box for additional information. So if for whatever reason, let's say the third question isn't relevant to your project, you can just write that in there. So then the next being resource allocation for inclusion. So to assess if the project includes sufficient resources dedicating to promoting inclusion. Again, this one's really important to have at the beginning of the evaluation, because if those resources aren't there, that might impact the rest of the project. So our 3 questions here, which I can go over each one of them too. I feel like that's important, but is there a specific budget allocated to address the inclusion needs of the project? Are the staff members on or teams designated to focus on inclusion within the project? Does the project outline cross-departmental collaboration or shared resources to support inclusion? So I'll just check 2 of those so I can show you at the end what the final score looks like. And the third being comprehensive planning and policy integration. So the purpose of this one is to ensure the project is designed with inclusion as a core principle in planning and policy. And the questions are, does the project incorporate inclusion objectives within its own core goals? Has the project team assessed and documented potential impacts on marginalized or underrepresented communities? And are there measurable inclusion goals for this project, and how will the progress be reported? So again, click 2 of them. And fourth being diverse workforce and training. Evaluate if the project supports a diverse team and includes a plan for ongoing training. Does the project prioritize diversity in recruitment or staffing, ensuring representation from diverse backgrounds? Is there a plan to provide inclusion training for project staff, especially for those in direct contact with the public? Are there mechanisms for assessing workforce diversity and inclusion within the project team? It's funny, this is the most I think I've ever read off of a slide or a page during a meeting, but I think it's important that we do hear all these questions, but sorry you have to keep hearing me read these. So the 5th being inclusive procurement and partnerships. So to assess if the project includes equitable procurement practices and partnerships with inclusive standards. And does the project's procurement plan prioritize working with underrepresented or diverse suppliers? Are vendors required to adhere to municipal inclusion and equity standards? And will the project track and report supplier diversity? So this one's another example of maybe this 5th section is not relevant to your project, and you would just include that in the additional information here about why you might not be filling out that section. 6, equitable access to services. Ensure the project provides equitable access to its services and benefits for all demographics. Does the project provide clear guidelines for accessibility, example, language, physical, and digital? Will demographic data be collected to identify and address disparities in service access? And will the project gather and incorporate community feedback to continuously improve access? There. And then the seventh being community-centered engagement and infrastructure, measure the project's effectiveness in engaging the community and creating accessible spaces. Has a project team established a plan to engage the community and gather input, such as through surveys, town halls, or focus groups? Are public spaces related to the project designated to be universally accessible and encourage diverse interactions? Does the project outline how community feedback will shape decision making? And then public awareness and incident response. Evaluate how the project will promote public awareness and respond to incidents of discrimination or inclusion. Does the project include a public awareness component that promotes diversity and inclusion? Is there a clear protocol for responding to incidents of discrimination or exclusion that may arise during this project? Will data on incidents, if applicable, be collected, analyzed, and used to improve inclusion efforts within the project? And then advancing accessibility. Purpose is to ensure the project adheres to the Accessibility Act and advances the accessibility objectives of the City of Fredericton. Does the project meet the requirements outlined in the Accessibility Act, including standards for the built environment, information, and communications? Have accessibility considerations been integrated into project planning, implementation, and evaluation stages? Has the project established a timeline for regular accessibility audits, adjustments, and with clear metrics for accountability? Does the project demonstrate measurable improvements in accessibility for people living with disabilities in physical environments, communication, and systemic processes? Has feedback from individuals with disabilities or accessibility advocates been incorporated into the project design and outcomes? There. So then at the end, it's going to give you a total score out of 29. So it'll populate down here. And then the clear button is just for if you wanted to restart the form, you could just hit clear and it would reset the form there. So I think I'll show you first the end evaluation form, and then we can come back to the strategies for social inclusion. I just wanted to show you how it populates down here. So we made a summarized version of the form that just includes your score and the specific questions for each section. So it'll keep your score over here and also populate that additional information. And again, give you a final score at the bottom. There. So we created this short form just so that if Sandy was filling out this evaluation form and wanted to submit it to Gwen, she wouldn't have to submit this 16-page document. She could just submit that short evaluation form. Or if you're redoing the evaluation form multiple times for a project, it's just a little bit more user-friendly instead of submitting this huge document. So then we'll come back to the final sections, which are strategies to improve social inclusion. So after the user completes the entire form, they're able to read through this section and are encouraged to think about ways that they can improve their score. So this might facilitate a meeting within a team, or might be something where leadership wants to think about, or each person involved in the project, but they're broken up again into those different sections. So strategies to improve accessibility, foster inclusive communication, promote active participation. So one of the strategies is to offer incentives like transportation stipends or childcare to increase participation. These are just examples that we saw in some of the other resources that we evaluated. But yeah, there's lots of different ones here, but we just tried to keep them as general as possible so that everyone could pull from this section too. And then there's just a bit of information here on the commitment to social inclusion and reiterating the purpose of this project and why we're using this tool, and next steps to complete after filling out this form. So evaluate your current practices, implement strategies, engage stakeholders, monitor and adapt, and foster a culture of inclusion. So I believe that is the end, other than we just have an appendix at the bottom with terms and key concepts with a variety of different definitions there that range from inclusion all the way to at the bottom. I think we have ageism here as well too, but that would be the end. So I guess now we can discuss some questions. anyone has any. Or if I missed any.
I'm going to stop the recording